Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. The War Within expansion is launching super soon, with the War Within beta soon to close, I guess around the time that War Within officially launches, and players are kind of left right now still scrambling, trying to figure out which class they're going to main for the next expansion. I've already got my pick personally, but I am planning on playing multiple different alts because over the time in the beta and the alpha I got to experience so many different fun playstyles that there's just way too many things that I would want to explore and keep exploring as we get into the season 1 of the War Within and the World Soul Saga. So if you are still on the fence of what you want to play, I did want to put together my top 5 favorites out of all of the 26 DPS specs available in WoW, and which ones really stood out to me the most, which ones really blew me away in terms of damage, performance, but also the playstyle and the replayability, as I actually went back to revisit these specs or just play around with them on the beta again and again, even when I'm not recording anything, just because they're that insanely fun. So this is going to be my top favorites from everything we've done over from the beta. As always, if you guys want to see more regular War Within class videos and guides in the future, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. Otherwise, let's dive right into this list. In no particular order, I want to start off with the Elemental Shaman because, my god, what a good class change, or a set of class changes that came for this spec. It is so good with a fantastic talent rework. Elemental feels similar, or familiar rather, but a lot more fresher and a lot more exciting to play into, especially when it comes to the spec of Elemental. But there's a lot of Shaman specific changes here as well, where they essentially adjusted the talent tree to give them a couple of new defensive options like Seasoned Winds, as well as Stone Bulwark Totem, which is so good, while also allowing them to pick up some of the more common Shaman specific things that you normally would have as part of every single one of your builds, allowing you to pick up even more totems than ever before and fully customize your talents with a little bit less restrictions. In the elemental side of things, this is where we saw probably the most amount of changes, and I guess the best way to explain it is whatever build you want to make, you can really make it happen. Whether you want to go full fire build or a lightning build or mix a bunch of elements together, because there are some very cool synergies like how Ice Fury now procs off of Lava Burst, and those Ice Furies allow you to create new elemental blasts with a nature and a fire spell. So the weaving of elements is really fun. But you also have better support for certain specific key builds such as Ascendance. If you want to make a build all centered around Ascendance, it's much easier to do so now because you can pick up Ascendance as well as deeply rooted elements. So you can have procs of Ascendance as well as a dedicated use for it, and you can amplify that use with either a shorter cooldown every 2 minutes or a much better burst window with additional haste every single time you ascend, which is also really fun. But then you have like niche builds like being able to go full elementalist, whether you want to play the fire or the earth storm elemental, and you could really extend the duration of these elementals, spawn smaller versions of these Ellies, and then pick up all of the other talents that end up amplifying those elements. In particular, if you play the lightning build, you get to summon even more elementals to your aid, which is a very fun and thematic combo for Ellie Shamans. Then there was also a ton of other common sense changes such as Earthshock and Elu Blast being on a choice node, which makes it much easier than having to invest 2 points just to pick up Elemental Blast, or Earthquake that can either be placed on your cursor like normally, or Earthquake that simply will spawn under your target without you having to target it with your mouse, which is also really fun. Plus they've added a bunch of other talents that have a bit more of this lightning synergy, but also some of the more familiar talents with a bit of that lava synergy as well. So you have a couple of different options to really make your own thematic build. And the playstyle as well as the damage profile of the spec has been a lot more fun when enhanced with Stormbringer or Farseer. Overall, Elemental has been doing incredibly well, especially in AoE content like Mythic Plus. It started off a little strong and they pulled back a lot of that lava focused Elemental Blast gameplay, which is a shame that it no longer exists, but then you having to switch to like a more chain lightning build, and it's actually might even be a little bit stronger than the original lava build. Not quite as strong, but it is now much easier to play into. You really just press one button that feels like it does billions of damage right now, whether you synergize together with the procs of Tempest, which are passive, but also you get used to them fairly quickly, or Farseer, which allows you to have more of a setup type of Shaman with Grandpa and Grandma assisting you in your burst combos. And the next spec worth highlighting is the Frost Death Knights, and you knew that this thing was going to be on the list because for multiple weeks over in the beta, this class was incredibly well tuned. Maybe some would say a little over-tuned, but I don't want to use that word. I don't really know exactly what Blizzard wants to do with Frost DKs, but both Unholy and Frost have been treated favorably, I guess is the best way I could put it. But they've definitely been on the cutting edge of one of the classes you want to bring in every single dungeon because they make that dungeon easier just because they can obliterate everything in front of you that much quicker than most other classes. But also when you play the actual Frost and Unholy combined with some of the hero specs, I feel like this is where I found the most amount of fun with Death Knight specifically. Whether you play the Rider of the Apocalypse with the horse, which just solves all mobility problems of the Death Knight, like if you just don't want to be moving around in the snail space anymore, Rider is the play, especially in dungeons when you have all of the riders. Every single one of them comes with various benefits and creates an opportunity for a ton of AoE damage. Although you could always play Deathbringer, which I've really grown to love more and more. This one started out as an underdog, but then they made a couple of changes, like adjusted its cooldown to match better with the rest of your abilities, adjusted some of the damage profiles, allowed the Deathbringer playstyle to actually scale off of your mastery, so now the damage is out of this world, and it's kind of like a big haymaker playstyle that's very explosive, but you get to use it a lot more aggressively than Rider of the Apocalypse. Plus, Death Knights have been able to create some kind of a hybrid build. I don't really know if this thing is going to stick, but normally Death Knights play a two-handed obliteration build focused about spamming as many obliterates as possible every minute to 45 seconds. Or you play a dual wield build focused on 2-minute windows with Breath as in Dragosa. But what if I told you you didn't have to do either one of them? And the more popular build that really rose on the beta was a dual wield obliteration build. So you're taking the sustained damage of Breath as Dragosa, or the benefits of Breath as Dragosa, playing around Frost Strikes, having those Frost Strikes shatter to cleave enemies around you with some auto attack talents that allow you to deal even more cleave damage while playing around these short burst windows of Pillar of Frost, so you always have this punchiness to go with the Deathbringer or with the Rider of the Apocalypse, but also a lot better damage in the downtime outside of those very cooldowns, which created for a very fun, kind of like a hybrid Death Knight build that I really enjoyed over on the beta. Besides that, Death Knights have also got a fairly robust change to their class talents, with a couple of new options in the capstone specifically, with things like AMS that can be cast on multiple targets, or AMS that can remove all magic effects from you completely, and to Magic Shell that can increase healing, or even no magic that can reduce damage passively, making Death Knights even tankier than ever before, which is probably one of the best parts about playing this walking apocalypse that is the class of Death Knight. Now from there I want to move on to another DPS spec that's been absolutely arcane blasting through dungeons. Arcane mages and Frost Death Knights in particular, for some reason, whoever is in charge of tuning those classes, they did a good job, but maybe too good of a job. And Arcane has gone through quite a lot of changes throughout the expansion. One, it's insanely strong, so it's been a ton of fun to experiment with in dungeons, because it feels like no matter what kind of environment you're in, the spec always has the potential to unleash just the most amount of damage, and just being a walking power cannon that is Arcade is just a lot of fun all on its own. But the spec did see a lot of quality of life changes, such as bringing down some of the top end complexity of the spec, or rather they're removing a lot of the complexity that's there for the sake of complexity out of a lot of the specs. Arcane is one of those specs that plays normally into a script rotation, which is essentially like a very long chain of abilities you have to execute in a very specific order that's about 2 or 3 pages long. Instead of playing around your resources and building and spending, instead the entire thing is kind of laid out from the first second that you start playing into the game to the very next time all of your major cooldowns are available. That script is gone, and the spec itself plays a lot more organically, playing around procs, playing around its resources, and playing around a little bit more naturally than ever before. And this simplification has been one of the best things, because a lot of newer players that never would have picked up Arcane have been picking it up on the beta. So if you never played Mage before, Arcane would be such an approachable spec going into this expansion, at least in comparison to its version from Dragonflight. Plus, Arcane Mages have fantastic hero specs, and Spellslinger definitely blew me away with its orb-based gameplay. It's a very fun but an easier option, though it seems that a lot of mages have been moving to Sun Fury in particular, just because this thing does a ridiculous amount of damage, which I wouldn't be surprised if it saw additional tuning. But the bird that you summon, the Phoenix itself, is a very powerful pet that you get to summon as Arcane, and that thing is highly effective, which makes you burst damage even better than before. Now the next spec I feel like was worth highlighting would be the Assassination Rogue, just because they're incredibly fun. Specifically because Rogues didn't really get too many changes. I mean, there are a couple of talent adjustments here and there, but Assassination plays relatively the same as before, but the hero spec of Deathstalker really has grown on me. And my biggest criticism with Rogues were that our hero specs felt a little bit too passive and a little bit too plain. But once they really got Deathstalker working, finally. Took a long while for it to happen because we've covered a lot of that on the channel here pretty closely. Deathstalker really opens up the way that Assassination can play into, and it's just essentially it's a buff management of this ability called Deathstalker's Mark, and as you spend calm points into finishers, eventually blooms into Darkest Night, where your next Envenom is extra powerful. It's a guaranteed critical strike, which is already exciting, grants you a bunch of energy, and kind of rewards you for consuming or building maximum calm points to get the biggest Envenom possible in order to restart those debuffs again until you spend them on more finishers and then get even more Darkest Night procs. And it's a very simple gameplay loop, but it's so rewarding because of this guaranteed critical strike as Assassination rogues. And rogues generally are a very burst-based class, or they can be at times, and being able to play into the big burst window as Assassin is a ton of fun, in my opinion. Plus, the playstyle of Deathstalker synergizes with Assassination to such a degree. It is obviously a very single-minded, focused type of hero spec, but Assassination plays with it so well because of the single-minded caustic spatter, allowing you to invest more time into single target damage that just generates free cleave and AoE around you. So very similar to Valera, as we have in the background of the Assassination talent tree, Valera roaming around an entire battlefield, sniping and taking out key targets one by one. Assassination rogues are able to really lean into that fantasy of a death mark assassin that marks a singular foe and then goes to eviscerate that target specifically, focusing down against all odds, while also getting some free cleave on the side. Makes for a very fun and a satisfying playstyle, especially in Mythic Plus dungeons. Now, for the final spec on this list, you honestly could just put up just about anybody. There's so many different fun specs to play over on the beta, but if I really had to pick one, I think I want to put in Survival Hunter, mostly because they got probably one of the best reworks, one of the best facelifts that I've seen in a very long while. Ever since Survival went from a range spec to a melee spec back in Legion, it never really quite felt right, or rather comprehensive. It felt like a lot of the talents you had kind of played against one another. You didn't have synergies. You had talents that kind of played almost individually. Some players at the time would call the spec kind of like a spinning plates type of spec, but the plates are spinning all at different intervals, so you just gotta manage all of these little like mechanics that don't really play together, but you have to manage them all at once, otherwise the entire thing comes crashing down. And over the last few expansions, it didn't really pick up in BFA or SL or Dragonflight really, but it really started to bloom, I'd say, in War Within, where it finally starts to feel kind of like a comprehensive version of what Survival could potentially be. From every single hunter getting quite a bit of a utility work from the class talent tree, taking out a lot of the damage components except for a handful of things like explosive shot and a couple of other damage oriented talents, but most of them have been thrown out into the spec talent tree, so this is where you'll find majority of your damage, allowing you to pick up a bunch of different utility, even things such as a personal dispel or a knock-up trap, if that is how you choose to play your hunter. As for survival, we got a couple of different components that really make the spec shine. Like, for example, the talent tree allowed them to rework the way that their abilities play off of one another. This is going to be mostly thanks to the tip of the spear, which allows your kill command to give you a buff that empowers your next ability. And this works for your raptor strikes, but also this works for your grenades, explosive shots, kill shots, or any of the other big abilities like Fury of the Eagle. So now you get to invest a lot of your abilities and weave them from one another, creating a flow of kill command, use an ability, kill command, use an ability, and they even let you bank up a couple of these kill command charges, which gets even more interesting when you're playing to flank strike, which allows you to gain 2 charges at a time. Then things like critical strikes can further amplify this damage even further, allowing for you a little bit more stat diversity, with crit as well as haste becoming more popular stats to pick from. But also then mastery becomes a much better stat because they changed mastery completely. And mastery now allows you to scale the damage of you and your pet by a flat amount based on your mastery, but also it reduces the damage you take since you are a melee class that's in the melee. There is a bit of a tether now that you have with your pet. As long as you're near your pet, you get them 100% more value out of this mastery spirited bond bonus. So you may want to kind of keep in mind where your pet is to make sure you don't fall too far behind, or have Aspect of the Eagle on handy, which extends the duration of that mastery if you do need to create a bit of a distance. But this overall makes Survival, which is a melee spec that has the survivability of Beastmaster or Marksman, which isn't all that great on average. It puts them alright in danger being in melee, and that also can make him really bad to play because that can make him feel squishy. But this mastery together combined with some of the more defensive bonuses that are being added into the Hunter class class talent tree, survival feels just as tough as any other melee, like rogues, as well as warriors, death knights, and you even have an immunity with turtle, so you're kind of closer to rogues than some of the other classes. So the best benefit is now it finally feels kind of safe to play in melee, so it's no longer a risk bringing a survival hunter over a rogue or a demon hunter, but also the change to the playstyle, a bunch of different talents with a bit of this dot poison build, more focus on mongoose bites and how they can even cleave, with abilities such as butchery, more abilities being tied together, new ways to modify your coordinated assault, either as a bigger, better version of it, or a much shorter cooldown for more instantaneous but more hit and run type of gameplay, as well as all the different ways that you can weave in explosives as well as grenades together. It creates for a more comprehensive spec that feels like all of the different gears are no longer grinding against each other, but rather working together in unison, powering the machine that is survival that can do quite a bit of AoE damage thanks to some of the recent tuning. But with everything being said, that is going to be my top 5 favorites from the War Within beta. As always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching this video, and hope all of you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it or found it informative or insightful, go ahead and give it a like. I would very much appreciate it, especially with the expansion coming out. Getting more videos of mine out into the algorithm would be fantastic, and liking the video helps with that tremendously. Also, seriously, join our Discord community, probably the best place to hang out, especially with the new expansion. And if you got any questions about anything when it comes to War Within, that'll be the best place to reach me directly. And also let me know in the comments below which classes caught your eye from the beta, which ones are you the most excited about, or at least plan on leveling first when it comes to the actual expansion launching in just a handful of days. Let me know all of that in the comments below, and I'll see all of you guys in the next one.